critical thinking, and how do you understand how this AI generated content impacts you, and is it good or is it not good?
Good afternoon. What I will look at would be largely the South Asian and the Indian context of what Christoph just spoke about. The idea of trust in relation to UNESCO and its guidelines, and where India stands in relation to all of this, both in terms of policy as well as in real terms on the street.
Thank you so much for having me. So I guess I'm lucky because my microphone works much better. So I'm Wija from Indonesia, and it's an honor to be here among these great speakers, this great panel. I would like to talk about the pressing issue facing Indonesia, because I'm a political scientist from Indonesia and also in Southeast Asia. In 2023, UNESCO launched a book entitled Guidelines for the Governance of Digital Platforms. And the subtitle was Safeguarding Freedom of Expression and the Right to Information. I will explain that in Indonesia and also in Southeast Asian countries, we lose both. Both of them are under threat. The freedom of expression was right now under threat by the repression of the state, and the right to information was also distorted because of the social media propaganda conducted by the power holders. That will be my take. Thank you.
Maybe I'll use this microphone because I'm going to be inviting our speakers. Actually, they have prepared a short intervention each for you to learn more about the topic, the angle they want to cover, and then we'll go to the interactive discussion. So I don't know who would like to start first. Christoph?
Thank you. The few elements that I'd like to share with you today regarding this digital trust or trust in the information, which is very dear to us. The first thing is we've had very good panel this morning and statements declaring how much the Asian countries or the Asian regions have dramatically augmented the digital presence. But we still have a huge issue of digital access. And my concern is that the more we get digital presence, the more digital becomes like clean air, access to food, access to water. So it becomes gradually a problem for people that don't have access to digital, at least decent access to digital. But then when you feel like you're part of the happy few, which obviously in India means you're one about 5 million or billion people, because I come from a tiny country that is France. We're only 60, so 60 million to us is like, oh my God, we already have the full France, and you, it's just like a normal city. So I guess the issue when you have access to digital is certainly you are challenged with another issue, which is, can I trust the information? Can I trust what I receive? And what I receive is what I make decisions on. And obviously, it means that we need to understand what trust is. Is trust related to the information integrity? But information integrity, again, is something that doesn't travel well. If you mean information integrity in Europe or in the States or in India or in China or in Japan, the Philippines, Indonesia, it's completely different. And from what we see among our network with the members, it's a very dynamic debate, an interesting debate among the people, because some people confer to information integrity the idea of data integrity, which was the original meaning, which is I want to make sure that the data I receive are truly from the source, that they are complete, comprehensive, they have not been manipulated, and that can use them, reliable. But if you go to what now information integrity means at a global level and United Nations level, it's more about the disinformation, which is, well, and the capability to trust what you receive to make your own decisions. So it's much bigger. And the issue I had in the panel, in the first panel, is that, especially talking to an educated audience, we tend to believe that it's easy, you know, we studied, so we know what's good, we know what's reliable, we know that this information is from a trusted source, but it won't work. AI, generative AI shows today that this information is for every one of us, unfortunately. And it's like a virus. It will go for one aspect of your life after the other. Now it's got more and more data about you, to understand what are your vulnerabilities and weaknesses or blind spots. And this is where this information will strike. And if you're educated, it changes nothing. It just means that you're too proud to understand you still are vulnerable. So this is something that we need to all try to learn again. And probably you know that learning twice is harder than learning once. The second thing I wanted to share is the regulation issue. This is what our network stands for. We help with regulation in a broader sense. And really regulation is about understanding that this is not only trusts, it's actually a chain of trusts. So we link all the elements of the chain of trusts and all the people that bring an element to the trust for the overall population. And that chain of trust is difficult to manage and maintain over the period, which is why we are so happy to have AMIC as a co-founder of our network, because the great job is done not only from a research perspective, but also from an advocacy perspective, from a groundwork perspective, and all these contribute to links in the chain of trust for information integrity. And the last thing that I wanted to share is about in the regulation is about the traceability and the enforcement of regulation. We used to, when President Trump came into power, is cut US aid, which has been dramatic, to be honest. But he didn't only cut US aid, he also cut all the support or the pressure, depending on how you feel it, of the US towards improving freedom of expression, improving democratic conditions in a vast number of countries. And USAID was like the funding mechanism to support this. So now we are facing an issue where a lot of countries are rolling back to historical attitudes and behaviors. And it becomes even more difficult for people that are helping for freedom of expression, helping for minorities, helping for digital rights, helping for climate change, to get heard and have impact. What I wanted to say about this is the fact that actually the more we connect the link in the chain of trust, the link will go stronger. So we need to maintain the effort being together. And obviously, as we see with all my colleagues, it means getting in relation to the governments, to the civil society and NGOs, to the academia, so they all understand they are one element, one link of that chain of trusts. And regardless if they believe the mountain is high, all of us together, we maintain something that will enable us to go forward. Because that's the reason why we also contributed to the for the Future of the United Nations last September in New York City, is because of the Pact for the Future Generation. I mean, the elite today, they will retire, they will grow old. The generations, if you see the demography around the world, compare the demography, let's say year 2K to the one 2050 to the one 2100, you will see that the world we will be facing onwards is not an AI world. It's a world where humanity will be 10 billion. That means 25% more than today. It's a world where the shift of population will mean a shift in power. The shift in generation will mean a shift in the way we understand civil rights. And this is what we will, especially in a context of a school like the, you know, great school we hear, one of these pillars of promotion and inclusion and integration. I think it's important to mention that there is hope. We keep discussing about how desperate the world is. This is not the way we should look at it. And I wanted to mention the fact that based on, if you go to the UNESCO website now, you will see that we've been helping a lot, and thanks to Mahali, who was like leading the pack for the Internet for Trust guidelines for the last 3 years. But we also helped with the document that was just released this month, that is the AI Companion Guide, and it's precisely aimed at people like you, so and me obviously too, understanding how we do responsible and ethical use of AI, how do we use it for education and public policy, how do we make it inclusive, and I think it's great if you also want to look it up, and we're happy to, you know, share with you what sort of feedback it brings. Does it deliver the message of hope I was mentioning?
Thank you very much, Christophe. That shows us now one of the major angles we're going to cover today's discussion. Maybe Dr. Chandra, you can now share with us your perspective for the audience. Thank you.
I have this, I'm trying to time myself because most of us who sit here, we don't know where to stop. Christophe talked about the need for us to learn and learn twice. My problem is that the more we learn and the quicker we learn, AI learns faster than us. So we have a bigger problem than just learning. Uh, I'm going to sort of speak and read bits and pieces of a much longer thing that I wrote for something else. Actually for this, but I thought I should develop it into something that I can send out somewhere. So the idea of digital transformation is very closely linked with today, with media and with democracy. I think that both media and democracy are at threat today, especially in, I don't know about the rest of the world, but at least in South Asia. Both of these are being threatened at a rate and at a pace that is very, very frightening. Now, some people believe that digital media is a threat to democracy. Others will argue that they represent opportunity for increased political participation. Now, these are two sides of the thing. However, we know from what we have seen in the elections in the past 1 year, um, in the super election year last year, that this the opportunity really is not a real opportunity. It is the people who are controlling media are trying to tell us that there is an opportunity. But really, I don't see that opportunity. Now, there's this institute called the Max Planck Institute of Human Development, the Hertie School, and the University of Bristol. All of these three conducted a project where they review how digital media impacts citizens on the one hand and political behavior on the other. And what is very fascinating is that and I'm quoting this from their report, says the advantage of their systemic review against the background of a divisive and often partisan debate is that it allows objective conclusions to be drawn. Okay. At the Institute Center for Adaptive Rationality, he studies how new technologies can help to promote participatory democracy online. While the impact of digital media on democracy cannot be judged as simply good or bad, the results clearly show that digital media can have devastatingly negative effects on political behavior. And this is a quote from their report. And they point at 6 key factors that change, particularly with the use of digital media, and have a relevant influence on democracy. 1, participation. 2, political knowledge. 3, trust. 4, polarization. 5, populism. And 6, echo chambers. Now, they argue that the first two, which is participation and political knowledge, are positive, and the rest are negative. From my own experience in studying media and media houses and media tracking data on social media, I find that this is not necessarily true. A lot of recent interdisciplinary research stimulates part of new methodological possibilities and data sources has shed light on this potential interplay between the positive and the negative. Although classical survey methods are still predominant, novel ways of linking data types, for example, linking URL tracking data or social media data with surveys, permit expansion in sample size. Now, what is happening is that we have started, even methodologically, we have a problem, because somebody in the first session talked about digital ethnography. Now, the problem with digital ethnography is that even the sample is created. Okay. So you create the sample and then you do an ethnography of a sample that is created. And once you do that, then you have the license to manipulate it. And that is, I think, where the problem lies. Now, what are the challenges in the context of um, all of this? What is happening today is what you see on the street, and I'm telling you what one sees on the street today in India and in various other parts of um, South Asia, is in the context. There's two things that have happened which has become very, very dangerous, and most people who are from India will vouch for this. The two things is, one is, and it's become very popular to even talk about it, which is crony media and surveillance state. Okay, these are the two things that have cropped up. Now, what is this surveillance? The surveillance outreach is the one system that is perfected to undermine trust. Okay, you can, and that is the reason why governments use it so often, is that it very, very easily undermines trust. So in India, most of you would have heard about the Pegasus spyware, which was introduced into many journalists' phones by the government. Now, when you target journalists and opposition, public faith in digital platforms suddenly come into conflict with UNESCO's freedom of expression position. Okay, so therefore, if you want to look at what is happening in India today, everything that is happening today in the country with regard to surveillance and with regard to the media is that it's a process by which trust is being undermined by the government and by the state. And I have often talked about this to my colleagues. I said, it's all wonderful to talk about, fake news, misinformation, disinformation, all of this. What happens when the state is the perpetrator of this? What happens is that you undermine trust, as far as I'm concerned. Now, the other thing that why does how does the government get away with this? The government gets away with this by suggesting that all of this that they are doing are because of national security. Okay, but that is the precise argument that allows for the existence of a surveillance state and therefore allows for the undermining of trust. Okay. The next one is media cronyism. Now, this one is a very, very fascinating thing, because what it does is that it is the system by which you amplify disinformation. Okay, so you create the state creates a system whereby it's not just misinformation and disinformation which is out there, but you have to create a system which will amplify that. And so therefore you create, those of you who are from India will be very aware of something called Godi media. This is a wonderful system by which you promote biased narratives, and so therefore you amplified disinformation. And then the third one is technological and societal barriers, which Christoph just talked about, which is AI deepfakes, cyber threats, election manipulation, outpacing regulatory responses. India's 950 million plus internet users amplify risks without any literacy whatsoever. And I have been trying very hard to get media and information literacy into the curriculum of Indian schools. Government of India is not at all happy with that. Okay. Then you obviously, because of this, you have narrative wars from foreign actors, because you have already created a system. So anybody who wants to use this system to amplify any kind of misinformation, disinformation, it's out there for. So I won't take much more of your time, but I just want to throw out some, because we were earlier talking about, digital inclusion, and in this country, everybody talks about, 900 million mobile sets, which are floating around, and there's so much of access and so on and so forth. So I just want to throw out this idea that Ministry of Rural Development has given these statistics, and I will tell you who else I've got this from. Only 16% of India's households received 1 to 8 hours of electricity daily. 33% received 9 to 12 hours, and 47% received more than 12 hours a day. That is electricity, which is the basic requirement for all of this. While 24% Indians own a smartphone. So your 800 million smartphones is divided among 24% of India's population. Okay. 24% of India's own a smartphone. Only 11% of households possess any type of computer, which would include desktop computers, laptops, notebooks, so on and so forth. Only 24% of Indian households have an internet facility, while 66% of India's population lives in villages. Only little over 15% of rural households have access to internet. Okay. For urban households, it is a little bit different, and that's why we think that there is such great penetration, because we are all part of the urban Indian reality. The urban household, the proportion is 42%. Okay. In fact, only 8% of all households with members aged between 5 and 24 have both a computer and an internet connection. So, and it goes on and on. I won't get into this, but just to sort of compare this to the rural, among the poorest 20% households, only 2.7% have access to computer and 8.9% to the internet. So with this kind of statistics, we should be a little wary in talking about inclusion, and a little bit ashamed of ourselves when we talk about inclusion, about trust, about media, and about digital transformation. I know that I am giving a dreary picture, but I think that this is part of the reality of what we live in, except that we all live in Bombay and Delhi and in big cities, and we do not realize that our reality is not the Indian reality. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Chandra. Thank you for highlighting the need for media information literacy and digital skills, of course. Bridging the digital divide is important in India as in the region, but also everywhere else. Now we have the last maybe introduction, let's say, by Dr. Wijianto, and then after that, we will have a couple of questions, and then we'll come to you. So I hope you have some questions lined up. Thank you.
Thank you, Mali. I also bring my cell phone to count how many minutes I will be late. Um, good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're still awake. I just flew from Amsterdam, so it's still early there. Before I respond to Maali questions about the pressing questions of our generation right now, allow me to begin with a brief context. I'm a political scientist from Indonesia. My study is Indonesia and Southeast Asia. And sadly, Indonesia, as well as Southeast Asia, and I think all around the world, democracy right now is backsliding, is declining. That's the situation of our day. And part of the reasons is the spread of disinformation in our public sphere. As I mentioned earlier, in 2023, UNESCO launched a book entitled Guidelines for the Governance of Digital Platforms. And the subtitle of the guideline was Safeguarding Freedom of Expression and the Right to Information. And I would like to talk about these two things. That first, today, our freedom of expression is under threat by the repression of the state. Second, that our right to information is also under threat because of the massive social media propaganda. And I will add another point about surveillance and threat to data privacy. I will start with disinformation. So currently, I'm doing research together with colleagues from the Philippines, from Thailand, from the Netherlands as well, about the cyber troops and disinformation. I noticed there are a lot of young faces here. Maybe you watch Netflix and maybe you watch a movie entitled The Great Hacks. Yeah, some notes. So you're young just like me then. So in that movie, we could watch how actually the data from Facebook, from other social media was crawled, and there was a mining for the data to manipulate public opinion. And maybe you read in 2019, there was a research released by Oxford that reveals that in 81 countries in the world, there was a computational propaganda and cyber troops. And this cyber troops and social media propaganda was the reasons why in 2016 Trump was elected as president. And UK exited from Europe, that we call as Brexit. And built on that research, we would like to know the situation in Indonesia, in Philippines, and in Thailand. And we found evidence that in the three countries, there were cyber troops. And when I talk about cyber troops, it refers to actors who work together to shape, to manipulate public opinion in our public sphere. And they were secretly paid for doing that. In Indonesia, we call them buzzers. And in that kind of situation in which the narrative in our public sphere was directed by the state through social media propaganda to manufacture consent, to polish a persona of a politician approaching the election, how could we expect trust to be built? That's the first point. The second point is about the threat to the threat or repression to critical voices. In Indonesia, as well as in other South Asian countries, there were threats to critical voices in many ways. In 2019, I was involved in a protest to the government in Indonesia, and I got my phone back then. I got a robocall. Have you experienced robocall? When your phone got called like 100 times a day, so you cannot use your phone. And after that, your WhatsApp was hijacked by who you don't know. But it didn't happen not just in Indonesia, but also the same mode happened in Thailand, in Philippines, in other countries. When the critical voices were silenced by the government, there were a lot of threats. They were hijacking your social media, your cell phone, and other tools. So that will be the second threat to trust to public space. And the last one is the surveillance and the attack to data privacy. Maybe you watch on TV that not long ago our president met with President Trump, and one of the agreement was that Indonesia only need to pay like 15% tax when we export stuff there. But there was another agreement in relation to data, and the agreement was that US will have access to the personal data of Indonesian citizens who used social media or other products from the US, like Google or other social media. So here we cannot talk about data sovereignty. So your data was monetized and there was no privacy on your data. It's a serious threat, and we talk about as well here what we call as digital colonialism, in which the North took the data from the South. That's the last instance. And also, actually, despite that our government talked so much about transparency, they were not transparent themselves, and they want the citizens, their personal data to be transparent. And they couldn't as well protect the privacy of the citizens, because not long ago, the personal data, identity number, millions of identity number of Indonesian citizens were experiencing breach, were hacked, and it was sold in the market. The story that I share to you, I believe it's not just a story of Indonesia or Southeast Asia. That's the threat that we experience today. I'm lucky to speak the last, because Christoph already addressed about AI, and also Chandra about the threat to democracy, and we all facing it. The use of AI to manipulate public opinion during election has been one of the trend that is so powerful that it can whitewash political elites who were having a black past involving on human rights violation, like in Indonesia, become a completely new persons who finally won the election. I will end there, and to sum up, there are three things that we should keep in mind, hopefully become our topic of discussion. First is the repression to the freedom of expression. The second is the censorship to the right of information, and the last one is surveillance and attack to data privacy. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Wijayanto. Now we have one question for each panelist. If you can answer us briefly so that we can open also the floor for the audience. I'll start with you, Dr. Gauthier. Given your leadership in an international alliance, research alliance, focused on digital governance, how does the Internet for Trust knowledge network foster innovation and multi-stakeholder governance models to strengthen trust in digital platforms? And maybe you can share with us some achievements, but also maybe some challenges that were faced engaging global actors and so on.
I guess maybe kitchen courses. I'm not saying, obviously I'm French, so I believe that French cuisine is better, but you would, that's normal. I guess you all would say that your mama's cuisine is better. The issues we face is like, on the one side, we gathered a lot of members, and it's a bit like an Indian thali. So you've got a bit of everything, but each in their little cube. And obviously you don't want to mix them. So political scientists don't want to be mixed up with lawyers, don't want to be mixed up with digital studies, don't want to be mixed up with NGOs. And they all have priorities on how to save the world. So it's difficult because, you know, you want to save the world, so you need to choose between them, or you need to have a nice blend. And then you go to the regulators, and they're not Italian. No, they are masala dosa, so complete different cuisine. And it's very difficult to see how can I make sure that the masala dosa guys enjoy the thali and the thali guys enjoy the masala dosa. So this is my job. And the way it operates, because I've been talking a lot of, you know, hope, and my friends have been depressing you on how the world is going. So the way it works, it means Guillermo Canera from UNESCO this morning was talking about this global initiative on climate change and information integrity. We help on that. How do we make sure that we can help journalists, media, against fake news, against obfuscation, the issues about minorities? If you people know about minority groups who want to have a claim because of things they suffer from, we've been advising people from the Niger Delta, for instance. They wanted to have crime against corporate crimes about oil companies, but they also suffered from disinformation. They asked us, how do we make this information a proof of what we were abused with? We also do workshops. We also try to help people with digital tools so they understand how we can avoid being confused with fake content. How do we help creators make sure that they can recognize their own creation despite AI generation, so that they can collect money and claim ownership, these sort of elements. So there are many very concrete and precise and operational ways to make sure that all these, you know, problems, dangers, frustrations that we see, we have solutions, or we invent solutions for them.
Thank you. Well, I'm glad that he focused on the solutions. after he highlighted the problems, I have a follow-up question for you, Dr. Chandra. So basically, and you gave us a bit of a, not that it's not true, but the grim picture of the situation, the current one. Now I would like you to maybe give us a bit of more of how these digital, these emerging digital trust frameworks or innovations hold promise for the region.
Actually, just before coming here, I was looking at some of the information put out by various governments. So I looked at the Digital India Initiative, the Digital Pakistan Vision, Bangladesh's Smart Bangladesh program, and so on and so on. I looked at a few, and the volatility is very clear in all of these things. It's not, nobody has clear-cut answers to any of those questions. But emerging from all of this is what we were talking about earlier, which is the digital trust frameworks. Everybody is talking about digital trust frameworks. How useful are these? How effective have these been so far? Is still open to debate. But there are issues. For example, India has 22 languages, official languages. We have about 5,000 other languages, 700 languages with literatures. In the last linguistic survey, we had 48,000 dialects and languages. Now, given this kind of diversity, I'm not sure how you can create frameworks for any kind of digital trust or innovation. Okay. However, I also looked at
However, I'm still waiting for the promising, for the positive side.
Yeah.
Still, you haven't given us one.
So I looked at the SARC AI framework, which is a very interesting one. I also looked at it. Now the positives is the digital consumer charter of the regional DPI interportability thing, which is a very interesting thing. It stacks. It's a kind of India stack. Okay. It stacks everything so that into neat stacks, so which gives you a easy handle to work with. And this ties up with the inclusive AI for development, which is the UNCTAD framework adapted regionally in 2025. Now, all of these frameworks promise resilience of some kind or the other. But we are still stuck with this sort of South Asia fault lines. Okay, surveillance outreach. For example, the IT laws in India, the cyber laws of Pakistan, the rural penetration being only 25, like I said, about 14 to 25%. Where I see the positives is where I think, yes, where I think all of you guys can do, which is how academia can, kind of help in all of this. And I listed out for 3 or 4 of these areas, which I'll not go into, but I'll just talk about 1 or 2, which is to establish joint innovation labs and fellowships is one of the areas I think we have been trying to do that in some way. But to me, the most important one is to co-design policy sandboxes with evidence loops. Okay, I think that the policy frameworks are being designed by people who are not necessarily the users. So therefore, I think it is important that the policy sandboxes must be co-designed. And then what Christoph just talked about, which is to build capacity through, most importantly, through open data ecosystems and incentives. I think that one of our biggest problems in South Asia is that data is all closed. And as long as they remain closed, they are open to be manipulated. So I think that if the moment we start creating open data initiatives, I think that these things will change.
Thank you, Dr. Chandra. My question to you, Dr. Wijayanto, is considering your experience in digital politics and democracy, what political and societal factors you think are mostly significant or to influence public trust? And also, what kind of, like, how could communication strategies at the end and democratic processes be leveraged to rebuild that trust?
Thank you for the questions. I am aware that during my talk, I talk about mostly about the problems, about the digital repression, about the censorship by the government, and also attack to the privacy, surveillance. Now, in order to find the solution for that problems, we have to address the forces and the forces who are responsible for that. And I guess we have to mention at least 3 actors here. The first actors, of course, the state. The state played a very important role in regulation and also to make sure in initiating the right regulation and also to make sure that the regulation is being implemented correctly. However, the problem is, like in Indonesia and other countries, there was no willingness from the state to create the right regulation. For instance, in Indonesia, we only have the information and transaction, electronic transaction, which is the law that in the law itself, it is more about limiting the freedom of expression, about safeguarding the policymakers, the power holders, instead of empowering the citizens, right? So actually, activists in Indonesia trying to advocate a more progressive law who protect the right of citizens more instead of repressing their rights. However, the law was never existed. It took years. We already struggled for like years in Europe, despite all the shortcomings, we have Digital Service Act, right? That kind of law, but it's not yet, it's still a long way to go. So that will be the problem. It will be a problem if the states have a habit repressing or silencing the critical voices, taking their data or hijacking their privacy, and yeah, that's gonna be a problem. And the power behind it in Indonesia is what we call as oligarchy. So the elites together with the business person who work together, collaborate together to make sure that such a progressive law never happening. And the second actors or forces that I believe has to be responsible is, of course, the digital platforms. So there's a case in Indonesia recently in which, you know, if Mali, if you're an activist and you're critical, and the state will hijack your WhatsApp or your email, and the state can do that because there's a regulation in Indonesia that give permission to the state to say, for instance, to the providers. So they ask the providers to give your personal data so they can track you. So you can see here how the state work together with the personal, with the provider, internet provider. And also there's a case in which the state, the government work together, I heard, with TikTok. All the critical voices in social media protesting the government, they asked TikTok to give the data. So the digital platforms has to be responsible in it. And in the first place, if we talk about social media propaganda, about disinformation, it's impossible to be there if the digital platform do their job for content moderation, right? But I guess Christoph, Chanda, when we were in Paris, in Sao Paulo, in Croatia, in every conferences of UNESCO, when we ask the person from digital platforms, they always answer, thank you for your questions, that's very good question. And in terms of content moderation, I need your help really as academics and society, civil society. It's our data engineering engineer is beyond their capacity to make sure that our public space is free from disinformation. So, you know, so they are not responsible, in my view. So they have to be held accountable. They have to be responsible for that. And the last actor is, of course, academics, so civil society, journalists. It seems to me that the state and the digital platforms will not do their job to protect freedom of expression, to protect the right of information, if we don't take it from them, if we don't force them to do so. And that's why maybe you read recently in Indonesia, there were protests from civil society to the state, not exactly about social media or regulation of digital platforms, but it reflects that actually when the state is corrupt, there will be protests. And in Indonesia, not just Indonesia, I guess not long ago in Nepal, when social media was taken, there were protests in it. And I guess that's where we can hope through the civil society movement together with academics, together with journalists, even though, of course, as an activist said in Thailand, our protest today, some people died, may not result in a change or a policy change right now. But we hope our protests will pave the way for the future generation. So in one way, it expresses hope, but in another way, actually, it expresses desperation. Because if you protest and some of your friends die, but you cannot see the result, it means like the situation is really, really bad that we really have to wait for some times to happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think we can open the floor now for questions from the audience. Question there in the back, then we'll come one here and then the third there. So we'll start with the back. Can someone give him a microphone? The second row from the back or the third row from the back? And please, if you can introduce yourselves before you ask the question, make the question straightforward. And if you have a specific panelist that is directed to, please let us know.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to ask this question. My name is Anup Latnikar. I'm a PR consultant and I'm a PR practitioner, so communications practitioner. I'm not a scholar as you all, but this is my second time at the AMIC conference here in India. First one was Hyderabad. So I'll get straight into the question. My question is to Dr. Chandra. It was a fascinating talk and we all paid attention to your presentation. My question is, you talked about the digital ecosystem where the government, the system that the government has created to uphold the narratives for disinformation. So the disinformation system that apparently the government and has created, can it be used or manipulated by the civil society to uphold the values of democracy against the government at some point? And whether that is possible, you think, in your opinion, and if that can pave somehow the way to change the grim situation worldwide that we are facing today. Thank you.
I'm not sure. Thank you for that. I'm not sure that the same system can be used in the reverse order. But I think that a similar system can be created and used by the civil society. But that will take a lot more doing, because what you have to do is like what Christoph was just saying earlier, which is that you have to do it twice over. You have to first, identify and learn about what is happening, and then relearn the way that you would do it. So it is twice over that you will have to do it, and it's much, much more difficult. Also, because of the various reasons that I mentioned in terms of the diversity in the country, it is very difficult to do it at a scale that would really matter.
That specifically came to mind because you mentioned regarding the war, information wars with the enemies of the state. So whoever that might be, apart from the state itself, or if in this Indian context, Godi media, if it was, let's say, the US or any other adversary, like Pakistan, for example, for India, would they be able to manipulate, and then in this using the same Godi media ecosystem that the government has created, and then in that context, the civil society? So
Don't you think it's happening? I don't have to answer that question. I think you know the answer to that. I mean, it's happening because if your end is the same, then you could use the same mechanism, and it's happening.
okay, thank you.
We have two questions from two speakers here, but because I also want gender parity, we'll take the lady later as well. So we 3 questions at least. I want to look at Ramon and the organizers. I know that we should have ended at 3, but we started a bit later. So can we at least take these 3 questions? Okay, let us know when we need to stop. If not, we can take more. But the gentleman here in the second row, please, if you can give him the microphone. And please, straightforward question, let us know to whom after introduce yourself.
This is Dr. Matthew Martin. My straightforward question to Dr. Christopher, it's about trust. My question to you is, do you trust human beings or the machines? If yes or no, what are the challenges that we have in navigating the digital transformation for media in terms of trust? Would you please explain here?
To be me. I guess if you don't trust the machine, you don't trust the human beings who made it, right? And if you don't trust the human beings, you can't trust the machines either. So there's a leap of faith. I think, and I think it goes also to the previous question, what we are struggling with is that the tools of emancipation have become tools of oppression. We used to think that all these digital technologies would help us out of our previous states, and suddenly they are turned against us. And obviously we need to adapt, and it's not easy. But then I tend to believe that, yes, I believe in human beings, but I'm not naive thinking they are all good. And this is critical thinking that we apply every day in our lives. But I probably need to remind you that human nature or humanity is one of the most social animal on the planet. So we bond and we do solidarity and friendship. And this is the basis of how we survived and became the biggest predator on our earth. So we ought to find ways, if it's not through these tools, and it may be longer, we will find new tools, new ways. We've seen it in Nepal. The the main digital tools, thinking, oh, you would not register, we chop you off. But then the youth use Discord. So there will always be another tool. There will always be another mechanism. But what we want to maintain is interoperability, portability of data, online safety, all these elements, digital rights. Yes, we need to make sure that each time we make a baby step in the right direction, we know that we help all of us.
Maybe if I may say something, as Christoph said, the key word is critical thinking, right? Unfortunately, for years, whenever we thought about media information literacy, we thought about schools and youth. We've seen during COVID that those who were sharing misinformation the most are people above, I think, 70 or 75. So basically, it's not a matter of choice anymore that you trust and you use or you don't use. You cannot not use. Nowadays, banks, online banking, right? Your finances are online. A lot of doctors see you, you have a video call sometimes, right? So all of us, no matter how young we are, before we start to speak, we hold a phone, the new generation. And seniors, post-retirement, they have to even manage their life, not just, if they're working anymore. So basically, it's not a matter of choice to trust or not. It's to be a critical thinker. And I think this is very important. So basically, we have to encourage media information literacy, and not just in schools. And now we have not only media information literacy in that scope, but also with AI. So I think most of us are still AI illiterate. The gentleman there, please, in the beige, you can give him this. Yes, in the second row, and then we'll go to the lady there in the middle.
Thank you. My name is Lakshman Datman. I have different hats. I'm the founding chair of Media Action Nepal, also AMIC representative in Nepal, with several international media alliances, including Media Freedom Coalition. I'm now elected to the board of GFMD as well, a former UNESCO program specialist as well. Since this is UNESCO emeritus dialogue, I would argue very politely that thanks that you touched on Nepal, you also responded to a question. But, it was not about digital disruptions as such. It was a triggering point that youths and several dissent have been asking authorities, successive governments, to address the deep root causes of corruption, the state loot. And that was a triggering point that, the social media ban, particularly a few, particularly Meta and this YouTube. So I have been part of several international and regional, countering disinformation initiatives. What triggers me and what worries me in these discussions is that we are not touching on a sort of a very important aspect, that is to engage authorities, that is to put pressure on, state actors, because they are the originator, the power centers, the businesses. We today talk a lot about climate disinformation and environmental journalism. So also artificial intelligence, these sort of things. I would ask any one of you to respond. What could be the role of international community, particularly agencies like UNESCO, to engage more on part of the government, on part of the authorities, not to engage in, creating a sort of information that ultimately goes out to public through media and social media outlets. We are more into youths, we are more into media, we are more into blaming journalism, that you are polluting this information ecosystem. So, but I think that I would politely, seek your response on how authorities and governments, this part of the world in Asia, could be more engaged in these dialogues so that they do not, create sort of information that fuels ultimately misleading narratives. Thank you.
So Nepal of the world again, which is good. My answer is it comes with the fact that you need something in return. It comes with the fact that if we are like, say, North Korea, and you have only very biased interaction with identified commercial partners, and we see that even after many decades of isolation, North Korea had to do something. It came with Russia, it came with China, it came with Iran, but they had to do something. They had to collaborate with other countries. This is where starts the pressure with the governments, because yes, they will try to be friendly with governments that they believe are close to them in terms of values, but they will still have to leave something in return. And with this chain of trust that I was talking about, this is where it starts. Because at some point in time, they need to leave for someone that will need leave to someone, etc. And that's the way it's been used ever since 1945. The world has been flipping in one direction. I think it was in a good direction because it was towards social progress, helping develop little by little baby steps, because there were these interactions that people could get something, but in return had to give something back. Provided we keep having this, and we've got bargaining power with these governments, we can make them change. Or with this business elite, we can make them change. And actually, this is the only way they're prepared to change.
Yeah, Lakshman, I think you're right that there has to be some kind of pressure put on state. The problem, I'll give you one or two examples. Last year, we had the UNESCO meeting in Dubrovnik, where there were people who had come from several countries all over the world, and these were all regulators of digital platforms. And it was quite interesting to see there were 350 odd regulators from around the world. There wasn't one from India, there wasn't one from Nepal, there wasn't one from Bangladesh, there wasn't one from Pakistan. Okay. One of the issues is that I mentioned it earlier, that what do you do when the state itself becomes the perpetrator of this? Then who regulates? So in the absence of regulation, what you are suggesting is some kind of a give and take, some kind of pressure that has to be put either by civil society or by other players on the state. But this has to be a give and take. It cannot be one-sided, because then it becomes confrontational. Because if the state has taken a public position, then either there has to be some kind of negotiation which has to be done, behind the scenes or whatever, or there has to be a very long drawn out process whereby slowly that pressure is built from the larger public. I think that's the only way. It has to be a give and take thing. My problem is today that in many parts of the world, the state becomes the perpetrator of fake news, misinformation, disinformation, surveillance, not only in Asia, not only in South Asia, in America. You know, today the best example is the US. So
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I would like to add a little bit. Maybe I can share the experience in Indonesia. In 2024, we had election, and the politicians, as you could expect, they don't want to be regulated on how they could do the political campaign, right? They want to use disinformation and they want to use everything. Fake news, social media propaganda. But we managed to take the politicians to the table to agree on, campaigning with integrity, not using AI, not using disinformation, not using cyber troops, and so forth. At least on paper, they agreed. But it was successful because I guess it needs both internal pressure, but also international pressures. And in that way, institution like UNESCO could help. So the civil society in Indonesia, back then I was the chairperson of 12 civil society organizations, coalition, to make sure that the election was free from disinformation, right? But it was very hard to bring the regulators, the political party, to sit together to agree on something. And to add the pressure, then we work together with UNESCO. So this international organization could help adding the pressure for a good purpose. And there's indeed a give and take in it. The political party, the politicians, why they come to the table? Because they want to give impression that they were campaigning with integrity, with not using hate speech, not using hoaxes, not using disinformation. So on paper, they signed the document, and it gave them a good persona, and it's good for campaign. It's good for convincing people that they are progressive minds and they are deserved to be elected, right? If they don't do it, then the other their competitors, the other political parties, the other candidates who came will take the benefit. So I will say that UNESCO can help, the international organization can help, but it cannot also help. It has limitation. It will only be effective if the civil society inside the country also actively pressuring the government, the state, to agree on something. And yeah, you sign, you do, even though they signed, they didn't do. But at least they sign, right? So what I want to say is that the international organizations will be useful, but it will only be useful if the power, the progressive forces inside the state, the government, also actively engage in the activism. And I believe Nepal has just demonstrated that the civil society willing to resist, willing to fight back. That will be my take. Thank you.
Hello, sorry. My name is Surya Gune. I am a lecturer here in Mumbai itself with HSNC University, and I'm a research scholar myself as well. I have a question which is similar to what we just discussed right now, but a little different in the sense that if we look at Asia as a large population, probably the largest in the world, probably the largest digital population also. But all the Asian countries, if we look at it, have a very different fragmented approach of regulating media, operating media as well. We like it or not, the realities of border issues, cross-border terrorism, etc., the issues like that, these are the realities. So even if we want to have a pan-Asia approach of media regulations and information literacy, passing of the information from one country to the other, it becomes difficult. Even for the audience, it becomes difficult what to look at and what not to look at. So I just wanted to ask if there is a possibility of a cross-sectional pan-Asian approach, and if there is, what could be the state of regulations, and who could be the leader in doing that?
Okay, let me give you an example. Let me give you an example. In India, if you draw a line from the westernmost point to the easternmost point, there is no break in communication at any point, any consecutive point. It simply isn't there, either way, north, south, east, west. The same model can work throughout Asia. Okay. The difference between Asia and let's say Euro-America is that here you have a largely pluralistic society, and there you have a largely monolithic, if you want to say. So it is much easier to navigate monolithic structures rather than pluralistic structures. But I think that the pluralism in Asia is the strength, and communication should not be the barrier. Okay, we should use our strength of pluralism without making communication the barrier. Very often, just like the question that you asked, the underlying question to that is, how do we communicate with Kazakhs or with, with Afghans or some Chinese or Tibetans or whatever? I don't think that's a problem. It has never been a problem in Asia. I mean, from ancient times, you have communication happening across Asia. Okay. I mean, the Chinese travelers came to India in God knows when, and they managed. Buddhism went all over the world without any problems. So I don't think communication is not the issue. We have other issues. Let's not get into that at the point. We have other issues. But I think that we should use the plurality as the strength rather than communication as the problem.
Other panels, sessions, the chance. And also, I bet some of you are tired and would like to have a nice, interesting, but shorter day and not longer than the program. But I have only one request from each speaker in one sentence, if possible, if that's ever possible. But in one sentence, what actionable recommendation would you have for actionable recommendation for a future ready, let's say, to what we're talking about, digital governance, for example? If you have one recommendation out of this discussion, what would it be? Or a wish, maybe. Maybe people thinking doesn't have to be a recommendation.
open data.
There's even one word, right?
I'm surprised.
I know. Yes, open data, portability, interoperability. I think this is what we need to go for.
Maybe more than one sentence, but I want to say that one actor that remains untouched is the digital platforms. They have to be held accountable. They have to be make sure that they are transparent. So I agree with the open data, but underlying it is the accountability of the platform itself. That's the policy that we should aim.
Hello. Hello. Okay. Before you all disperse for the tea and then for parallel sessions, we are going to show you here which venue is exactly where, which room is where. Okay. I am told that you all have received the email about when is your paper presentation scheduled. So that clarity is there. No confusion about that. So you can see that this is venue A, venue 1. That is session A. Session A is going to happen here in this room. So after the presenters in this room have the tea, please come back to this room. For session B, there is a committee room here. Is there a volunteer from committee? Huh? So here are the 2 volunteers from session B. So they will take you to session B. Session C, D, and E are on the first floor. So once you are done, are there any volunteers from CDE1? C, there is also a volunteer. She will take all CDE upstairs. So there, and you please, she will take you there. And whatever human resource less, I will help you. Thank you.
And then after the parallel sessions, we invite all of you to here for the master class on reputation 5.2, 5:30.